Are ADHD and addiction related? We're talking about food, gaming, etc. What do you think? I'm Nicholeen Peck, and I teach all over the world about parenting, good communication, how to build strong family bonds, child development, education, habit training, those types of things. And I do that through the lens of the principle self-government. And in this video, we're talking about ADHD and if there's a connection to addiction. In this video, we're going to be talking about ADHD and what that processing is like and how it may or may not relate to addiction. So ADHD is pretty prevalent in our culture, and it does look different for different people, which can make it difficult to determine whether a person actually has ADHD or not. And there's definitely a mix of opinions when it comes to each individual case. But the question really, I think, on people's minds is, if my child is having an addiction or seems to have an addiction, do I have to just say, well, that's because they have ADHD, or do I treat it in some other unique way? So for years, I did therapeutic treatment care for troubled teens. And the majority of those teens that came to my home had in their files ADHD. So they had ADHD, sometimes OCD with it, sometimes RAD, and oftentimes FAS, different trauma, honesty issues, anger control issues, those types of things that they were dealing with. And I knew if it said ADHD, then that meant that they would have increased impulsivity. Now, that increased impulsivity can lend itself to falling into addictive tendencies. So it could be that something is you crave something, or you're curious about something and you impulsively go toward it. And so every time that you feel a craving, you could have that impulsivity response to just jump into it. But I don't think it's the ADHD itself that would actually lead to the addiction. So I don't think you can blame ADHD on an addiction. When a person has ADHD, they often get distracted easily. That's one of the most common components of ADHD. They have a hard time tracking multiple different things at a time and making sure that they follow through to the end on all of those things. Sometimes they zone off when other people are able to focus in. But then there's also part of ADHD where if something is super interesting to a person, they can focus very deeply on that thing, so much so that they then tune everything else out. So when a person has ADHD, that basically means that their focus can either go way in and black everything else out, or when it needs to go in, for some reason, is taking in all of this other stuff around them. Those are the two most common. That and usually increased anxiety or impulsivity can also accompany ADHD. So let's talk a little bit about addictions then. If you've already subscribed to this channel, you know I have multiple videos related to habits and habit training and overcoming certain things that you might be addicted to, such as maybe ruminating or having outbursts and anger. There are a lot of videos about self-regulation, those types of things. There are many things that a person can be addicted to. They could be behavioral addictions, they could be thought addictions, they also could be substance addictions, right? Things that impact the chemicals in the body as well. When I'm talking about addictions, usually what I think of is what is going on in the processes in the brain. Why is it that the brain is hyper-focusing on this one thing? Because usually that is what happened when a person has an addiction. They start thinking about the one thing, they continue to focus on it, and they can't stop. Now, in that respect, ADHD could contribute. If the person starts to put their hyper-focus effort on whatever the craving is, whether it's a drug or food like sugar or something, or whether it's maybe an addiction to some sort of misbehavior or something like that, if they keep thinking about it again and again and again, and they put all their focus there and they tune everything else out, then yes, it could be hard for them to pull out of that addictive tendency. However, Truthfully, almost anyone could do that if they started ruminating on something, if they start thinking again and again, I need this, I want this, I've got to have this. So what do we need to do, whether we have ADHD or not, if we have an addiction that we're struggling with, or if we're trying to help another person conquer an addiction? I think that's the main question that we should be focusing on. I don't think that if a person has ADHD that they should get a free pass on an addiction. I think they need someone to advocate for them and help them try to overcome that addiction, whether it is related to the impulsivity or the hyperfocus or not. Because anyone can become obsessive about something and not have ADHD. Anyone can create a habit of wanting to require a certain high or substance and not have ADHD. That's just the nature of addiction, and it can inflict anyone. In order to be effective at conquering an addiction, a person needs to pre-plan. So there are 5 keys of self-government: roles, analyze, plan, act deliberately, and communicate effectively. When a person is engaged in these 5 things repeatedly, that keeps them on the track of self-government. I don't have a lot of time to talk about roles. There are many videos on this channel. If you've subscribed to this channel, you know there are videos about roles, so you can see those. But I do want to talk about analyze. So when you analyze, you decide, okay, what is it that I want to accomplish? Or what is my end goal related to whatever the issue is? And then you say, okay, what seems to be getting in the way? What is it that I do that causes a problem? So let's say we have an addiction to maybe media or gaming or something like that. We might say, the situation is I am on that gaming device too much. Too many hours in a day. So what do I do about that? Because what are the negative consequences of me being on that device? I don't connect with other people. I'm isolated. It is fun, which is nice, but I also am not accomplishing anything else, and I'm starting to have this feeling like I'm not accomplishing things in my life, or I'm somehow not living regular life. Other people have told me that they have observed this about me, so that cannot be a good thing either. So what do I really want for myself? Well, I want to be able to exercise some sort of restraint with my gaming. I want to be able to know when enough is enough and be able to turn that off or not think about it anymore. So now we get to the next step in those 5 keys of self-government, which is to plan. And we say, okay, so how do I plan for that then? What is my plan? Now, normally when I go down the road to gaming, I get this little craving inside. Maybe as soon as I feel that craving, I can stop myself and I can think, oh, I'm feeling that craving. It's trying to get me to want to play games. I need to just take that for what it is. It's a craving. So now, what am I going to do about it? What are my options? I can either satisfy the craving, or I can follow my plan to go outside and start doing some exercise, or to go do some yard work, or whatever it is that the person has decided it is part of their plan. So then the person would act deliberately and follow through, and then they would do a follow-up conversation with themselves or with somebody else to see how they did at following through with their plan to conquer that moment that could have fallen into feeding an addiction. Sure, playing one video game may not hurt a person, but when the person is disconnected from real life, when they're not sleeping, they're not eating properly, they're not communicating with other people, they're staying shut up in their house, they're not getting a job or doing any other extracurricular activities, and they think that their attachment to that device is more important than anything else, then it is a problem. It's a health problem, because they've become detached from reality and what it means to be a human and live and be productive, and they've lost their connections with other people. So they need a plan. Now, any person, whether they have ADHD or not, can go through that same process of self-government. And I know, because the foster children that came to my home, the majority of them had ADHD, and we would work through similar scenarios, things they were addicted to, maybe sexual, maybe chemical, maybe anger, those types of things, and we would work with them. and they were successful at overcoming addiction by learning the skills and principles of self-government and utilizing those 5 keys of self-government again and again and again. But it does usually take a person who will check up with them so that they can communicate effectively with you about what happened and make plans for the future as they go back into that analysis step. Now, in the Teaching Self-Government Parenting program, there are multiple skills that are taught. These are adult skills. They're not just meant for children, but children can learn them at very, very young ages. Some of these skills are things like following instructions and accepting no answers and accepting consequences. Those 3 skills are actually very pertinent to overcoming an addiction. When a person is struggling to make a plan for overcoming their addiction, if they have skills like that, they have useful tools to help them. They can give themselves a no answer, they can give the addiction in their head a no answer, and choose deliberately to give themselves an instruction to focus on something else. If they have planned ahead of time for what they will focus on instead of that addiction, that makes a world of difference. Then, if for some reason they still fall into the addiction, they can accept the consequences of that behavior. They can self-correct and make plans for a better outcome in the future. Self-government is the recipe for success. Whether you have ADHD, OCD, ODD, or anything else that you might be dealing with, or whether you're just a regular person who has regular struggles such as addictions. If you want to learn more about some of these skills that I've been talking about and the principles of self-government, there is a full-length class on this channel called The Not So Known Secret to Parenting Success. Click on the link to that video now to learn more.